A wealthy businessman discovers a flight attendant secretly returning the watch she stole from him, and instead of punishing her, he does something that leaves the entire plane in shocked silence. What happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Let's fade into the story. Elena Cruz's alarm clock rang at 4:30 a.m., its shrill sound cutting through the silence of her small one-bedroom apartment. She lay still for a moment, staring at the cracked ceiling above her. The weight on her chest wasn't just from exhaustion, it was from the bills stacked neatly on her bedside table, unopened but ever-present. Her mother's medical invoices alone could sink her. Dialysis, medications, consultations. Every time she thought she had caught up, another envelope arrived. Rent was overdue, creditors were calling, and Elena, once a bright-eyed graduate who dreamed of seeing the world, now dragged herself into her flight attendant's uniform with trembling hands, hoping nobody at work could see the storm raging inside her. She stood in front of the mirror, fixing her navy blue blazer, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The reflection staring back wasn't the cheerful hostess passengers expected. It was a woman fighting battles no one could see. Still, she forced a smile. In her line of work, smiles were mandatory. At the airport, Elena's steps quickened, blending into the sea of uniforms. Her colleagues greeted her with casual chatter about vacations and new shopping finds. She responded politely but distantly. After all, she couldn't join conversations about luxury handbags when her reality was wondering how long before the landlord evicted her. As she stepped onto the aircraft, she felt a familiar mix of pride and pressure. She loved the skies. She loved watching the sunrise through cabin windows, the childlike awe of passengers traveling for the first time. But today, the weight of desperation pressed harder than usual. And then, she noticed him, Richard Lawson. Everyone in aviation seemed to know his name. A successful businessman, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, boarding with the quiet authority of someone who never had to worry about bills in his life. His shoes gleamed, his briefcase looked impossibly polished, and on his wrist glimmered a gold watch that caught the cabin lights like fire. Richard settled into first class, nodding courteously at the staff. He removed the watch carefully, placing it inside his briefcase before sliding it under his seat. The way his hand lingered on it told Elena one thing: this wasn't just jewelry, it was precious, personal, perhaps even priceless. And something inside Elena cracked. She didn't plan it, she didn't even fully understand what drove her, but when she stooped down to pick up a fallen napkin, her fingers brushed against the briefcase. She glanced around. No one seemed to notice. In one impulsive moment, her hand slipped inside, lifting the gleaming heirloom, tucking it swiftly into her pocket. Her heart thundered in her chest. What had she just done? At that exact moment, Grace Miller, a retired schoolteacher with sharp eyes and a sharper sense of justice, looked up from her crossword puzzle. She had seen the motion, the flick of Elena's hand, the disappearance of the watch. Grace's lips pressed tightly together. She had raised hundreds of children over her career, and she knew the look of guilt better than anyone. By the time Richard stood later to retrieve something from his case, Grace leaned slightly toward him, whispering. His brows furrowed, his hands searched the case, and then, in a voice that silenced the entire cabin, he rose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard Lawson announced, his voice firm and unwavering, "my watch, an heirloom from my grandfather, has just been stolen." Gasps rippled across the rows. Passengers glanced around nervously, whispers darting like arrows. I searched. Suspicion spread, and in the middle of it all, Elena froze. The weight of the watch in her pocket suddenly felt like iron chains pulling her into the earth. Her breath quickened, her palms grew damp. She forced her body to keep moving, offering drinks with a rehearsed smile. But inside, she was unraveling. She imagined the police waiting at the gate. She imagined her career ending in handcuffs, her reputation shattered forever. She imagined her mother alone, with no daughter to fight for her. And though no one spoke her name, she felt the eyes, some curious, some suspicious, some almost pitying. As the flight carried on, every second stretched into eternity. Each clink of a glass, each passenger's request, each casual laugh, all of it blurred as her conscience screamed louder and louder. By the time the plane began its descent, Elena's heart had made its choice. She could no longer carry the weight. With trembling steps, she walked toward Richard's seat. Passengers leaned closer, sensing something extraordinary about to happen. She knelt slightly, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, I took your watch." Her throat tightened, tears filling her eyes. "I'm so sorry." A hush fell, the kind that makes the air itself feel heavier. Elena's tears slid freely as she placed the watch into his hands. "My mother is gravely ill. The bills, they're drowning me." "I wasn't thinking." Please, forgive me. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps these important stories reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the engines humming beneath the floor. Dozens of passengers leaned ever so slightly toward first class, their curiosity burning. Some expected Richard Lawson to explode in anger, to summon security, to demand Elena's immediate arrest. After all, this was theft, betrayal, committed by someone entrusted with service and safety. But Richard didn't shout. He didn't call for the captain. He didn't even stand. Instead, he studied Elena. His dark eyes softened as they scanned her trembling hands, the tears streaking her cheeks, the raw fear etched into her face. "Elena," he said gently, surprising her with the use of her name. She hadn't told him. He must have read her name tag. "Look at me." Her gaze rose reluctantly, like a child waiting to be scolded. "That watch," Richard continued, holding it carefully in his palm, "is the only piece of my grandfather I still carry. It is not just gold. It is memory. It is legacy." His words pierced her like arrows. Shame burned hot in her chest. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some muttering under their breath. Grace Miller, the retired schoolteacher, watched silently, her sharp eyes now softened with a glimmer of curiosity. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered again, her voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking. My mother, she's very sick. I've been drowning in debt, and in a moment of weakness, I thought maybe." She couldn't finish. Her sobs broke through, and that's when Richard did something no one expected. He placed the watch carefully back into his briefcase, then reached inside again. This time, instead of pulling out anger, he pulled out a small leather checkbook, the kind no one carried anymore, except, apparently, Richard Lawson. Passengers leaned closer, their mouths parting in disbelief. Was this man seriously? Richard uncapped his pen, his movements deliberate, measured. He wrote a figure, tore the page, and held the slip of paper out to Elena. Her eyes widened. She didn't reach for it. I don't understand," she stammered. "This," Richard said quietly, "is for your mother's care. Settle her bills, lift that burden, and remember this moment not as the day you lost everything, but as the day you found the strength to start again." Gasps erupted across the cabin. Some passengers clutched their seats. Grace Miller's hand flew to her mouth. Elena shook her head violently, backing a step away. No, I don't deserve this. I stole it from you. I betrayed your trust. You should hate me." But Richard only shook his head. "Hate is easy," he replied. "Compassion is harder, and right now, compassion is what you need most." His words were steady, but behind them was something more, a quiet authority that made even the angriest passengers pause. Finally, with trembling fingers, Elena took the check. Her tears fell so freely they stained the ink. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. The passengers who had moments earlier looked at her with suspicion now stared in stunned silence. They weren't just witnessing an exchange of money. They were witnessing an act of mercy so radical, it shifted the entire atmosphere of the plane. Elena sank into the jump seat at the side of the cabin, covering her face with her hands. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the shame. Richard leaned slightly toward her, his voice dropped lower, just for her to hear. "Do you know why I carry that watch?" he asked. She shook her head, peeking between her fingers. "My grandfather was a farmer," Richard said. "He worked with his hands, every day of his life. We didn't have much, but he taught me something that shaped everything I am today. When you see someone drowning, don't throw stones, throw a rope." Elena's chest tightened. For months, she had felt like she was drowning, and here was a man, a stranger, offering her a rope instead of stones. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a flicker of hope. Passengers slowly returned to their seats, the buzz of whispers filling the cabin, but the mood had changed. Where suspicion once lingered, now there was awe, even reverence. Grace Miller leaned across the aisle, her voice soft. "Young lady, I taught children for 40 years. I've seen many fall, but I've also seen them rise higher than ever after. You have the chance now. Don't waste it." Elena nodded, her tears still flowing. "Thank you," she whispered. As the plane touched down, the tension eased. No handcuffs awaited her at the gate. No police officers stormed the aisle. Instead, there was only Richard's calm presence, Grace's gentle encouragement, and a cabin full of witnesses who will never forget what they had seen. And so, what began as a moment of shame became the beginning of something entirely different, an unlikely bond between a struggling flight attendant and a powerful businessman. But as we'll see, the journey was only just beginning. For sometimes, the hardest part of redemption isn't receiving kindness, it's learning how to live up to it. What would you do if you discovered someone with incredible struggles hiding behind their mistakes? Would you punish them, or would you offer compassion? Let me know your thoughts below. I read every comment. After the plane landed and passengers dispersed, Elena lingered in the terminal, still clutching the check as though it might vanish if she let go. She expected Richard to walk away, disappear into his world of luxury and power, leaving her with only the memory of an extraordinary moment. But he didn't. Instead, Richard slowed his pace, waiting until she caught up. "Elena," he said softly, "you don't have to face this alone." She blinked at him, unsure. "Why? Why would you still want to help me?" "I lied. I stole it from you. You could have destroyed my career in one sentence." Richard adjusted his briefcase, his expression calm. "Because I believe in second chances. My grandfather believed in them too, and because sometimes, the right help at the right time can change a life forever." That evening, Richard invited Elena for coffee at a small cafe near the airport. She hesitated. Was it pity? Was it charity? But the sincerity in his eyes disarmed her. She agreed. Over steaming mugs, she found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in months, about her mother's illness, about the crushing bills, about the shame of smiling at passengers while feeling her world crumble inside. Richard listened, not with impatience or judgment, but with genuine attention. "You're stronger than you realize," he told her. "You've been carrying more than most could bear." For the first time, Elena didn't feel like a failure. She felt seen. In the days that followed, their paths crossed again. Richard reached out, offering guidance on financial planning, helping her negotiate hospital bills, even connecting her with a trusted medical advisor who could reduce her mother's costs. And in return, Elena reminded Richard of something he had nearly forgotten. Despite his wealth and status, he had become distant from people, from emotions, from simple human connection. Elena's raw honesty, her tears, her gratitude, they pierced the armor of his corporate life. One evening, after another long conversation, Richard admitted something he hadn't shared in years. "My grandfather once told me wealth means nothing unless it changes lives. Somewhere along the way, I think I started measuring my life by numbers, not by people. Meeting you reminded me why he gave me this watch in the first place." Elena smiled faintly, tears glistening again. "And here I thought you were just saving me, but maybe I was sent to remind you too." Word of what happened on the plane began to spread. A few passengers who had witnessed the exchange shared their stories online, posts about the billionaire who forgave a thief and a flight attendant's second chance. The reactions were mixed. Some praised Richard for his kindness, others accused Elena of manipulation, of using her mother's illness as an excuse. At the airline, whispers grew. Some colleagues avoided her, rolling their eyes when she passed. Others quietly slipped notes of encouragement into her locker, saying things like, "Don't let them bring you down. Everyone makes mistakes." The pressure was suffocating. Some nights Elena lay awake, clutching the check Richard had given her, wondering if she even deserved it. Despite the doubts and whispers, Elena began to open up more in Richard's presence. She shared her dreams, how she once wanted to be a nurse, how she loved helping people, how she only became a flight attendant because it paid enough to support her mother. Richard encouraged her to think beyond survival. "What if this moment doesn't define your end?" he asked one evening. "What if it defines your beginning?" Elena laughed bitterly. "It's easy to say when you're you. But me? I'm one mistake away from losing everything." Richard leaned forward. "Or one choice away from rebuilding everything." But just as hope began to grow, the world came crashing in. A week later, Elena was summoned to the airline's headquarters. She walked into a cold conference room where three stern managers sat. On the table before them lay a printed statement, a passenger's formal complaint about the theft incident mid-flight. "Elena Cruz," one of the managers said firmly, "your actions have violated company policy. Regardless of what Mr. Lawson has chosen to do personally, we cannot ignore the severity of this breach. We are initiating disciplinary review. Termination is under consideration." Her stomach dropped. Termination meant losing her income, her insurance, her chance to care for her mother. The very thing she feared most was now at her door. That evening, Elena called Richard in tears. "They're going to fire me," she sobbed. "Everything you did for me, it won't matter. I'll lose my job, my home, my mother's care. It's all over. For a moment, Richard was silent on the other end of the line. She braced for him to say it was out of his hands, but instead, his voice was steady. Elena, this is just another storm, and storms are not the end, they are only weather. Let me stand with you through it. Elena wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at her. What if they don't care about your support? She asked bitterly. What if to them I'll always be the girl who stole? Richard paused, then answered with quiet conviction. Then we'll show them the woman who gave it back, the woman who owned her mistake, the woman who chose courage over fear. That's the story they need to see. His words steadied her heart, but the path ahead was uncertain. For the first time, kindness would be tested not by tears and forgiveness, but by the harsh reality of consequences. And so, just as Elena began to rise from the weight of her mistakes, the world threatened to pull her back down. But true kindness doesn't end at the first act, it deepens, it fights, it persists even when obstacles appear. The question now is clear, would Richard's compassion be enough to shield Elena from losing everything? The following week, Elena sat once more in that cold, sterile conference room. 3 managers stared across the table at her, their faces impassive. Her uniform felt heavier than ever, as though the very fabric judged her. Elena, the lead manager, began, our decision today will be final. You're here to make your case, if there is one. Her throat tightened, words stuck. How could she possibly explain to people who saw only policies and procedures what desperation had done to her? Before she could speak, the door opened. All 3 managers looked up in surprise as Richard Lawson strode into the room, briefcase in hand. His presence filled the space instantly, commanding authority without a word. I believe I have a case to make as well, Richard said calmly. The managers shifted uneasily. Mr. Lawson, this is an internal matter. With all respect, Richard interrupted, it's not just internal when my name and property are at the center of it. He placed his hands on the table, steady and sure. Elena made a mistake, but she also admitted it. In front of an entire cabin of witnesses, she returned what she took. That takes courage most adults never find. If you punish her for this, you are not teaching accountability, you are teaching despair. And despair destroys more lives than mistakes ever could. The room was silent. Even Elena sat frozen, her mouth parted in disbelief. She deserves discipline, yes, Richard continued, his voice measured, but discipline is not the same as destruction. What she needs now is guidance, support, and a chance to prove she can rise higher. Fire her, and you not only break her spirit, you lose a loyal employee who has already learned the hardest lesson of all. The managers exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. Mr. Lawson, your words carry weight, but the decision lies with the company. Richard nodded. Them know this. If Elena Cruz walks out of here unemployed today, I will ensure the world knows what she did after her mistake, how she confessed, repented, and showed more integrity in that moment than many executives I have met in boardrooms. Do you want to be remembered as the company that crushes honesty, or the one that redeems it? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the lead manager sighed. We'll deliberate. Wait outside. Minutes later, Elena was called back in. Elena Cruz, the manager said, his tone begrudging, we have decided not to terminate your employment. Instead, you will be placed on probation for 6 months. Your record will reflect disciplinary action, but your job remains. Elena nearly collapsed from relief. Tears filled her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. In the weeks that followed, Elena changed. No longer did she drag herself into uniform weighed down by bills and despair. Instead, she walked with her head higher, her smile no longer forced but genuine. She began budgeting carefully with Richard's guidance, learning skills she had never mastered before. With a check he gave her, she cleared her mother's immediate hospital debt, and for the first time in years, they could focus on care instead of fear. Her colleagues noticed the difference. Whispers still lingered, but now they carried admiration too. Some even confided in her, sharing their own struggles. Elena began offering encouragement, saying things like, mistakes don't define us, what we do afterward does. Passengers noticed too. Where once she served quietly, now she went above and beyond, helping a nervous first-time flyer through turbulence, kneeling beside a child who had dropped his toy, comforting an elderly woman traveling alone. Each act was small, but together they painted a portrait of someone reborn. Months passed, and Elena's probation came to an end. Not only had she kept her job, she had thrived. Management noted her improved performance, her growing confidence, and her ability to handle difficult situations with grace. At home, her mother's condition stabilized with better treatment. On good days, they laughed together like they hadn't in years. Elena no longer carried the constant weight of dread, she carried hope. And Richard, he didn't fade from her life. Their bond deepened, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and care. He became a mentor, a friend, and, though neither dared speak it yet, perhaps something more. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Richard handed Elena the watch. Her eyes widened. "No, I can't take this," he smiled. "I'm not giving it to you. I'm lending it, as a reminder. You once held it in your pocket with shame. Now I want you to hold it with pride. Every time you look at it, remember, you are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by the courage you took to rise from them." Elena's hands shook as she fastened the watch on her wrist. This time, it felt like a crown, not chains. Weeks later, Elena worked a flight where a young man was caught trying to slip a wallet from another passenger's bag. Security was called, but before things escalated, Elena knelt beside him. "Listen," she said softly, "I know what it feels like to think one mistake will fix everything. But it doesn't. It only makes the pain heavier. Trust me, I've been where you are." The young man's eyes widened. He looked at her, confused but touched. Instead of condemning him, Elena advocated for leniency with the captain. He admitted it, she said firmly. "Give him a chance to set it right." Her colleagues glanced at her, surprised, but also moved. And in that moment, the circle completed. The woman who once begged for mercy now gave it. The kindness Richard had shown her rippled outward, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. And so, Elena's story came full circle. From the shame of a desperate mistake to the strength of a redemptive transformation, she became living proof of a powerful truth, that one act of kindness can spark a chain reaction strong enough to change the course of countless lives. Months turned into a year, and Elena Cruz's life looked nothing like it had on that fateful day in the sky. Her mother's health had stabilized thanks to proper treatment, not a cure, but a manageable path forward. With the crushing weight of overdue bills lifted, Elena could focus on being a daughter again, not just a caretaker drowning in fear. At work, she became known as the heart of the crew. Passengers often mentioned her name in reviews, praising her compassion and warmth. Supervisors who once doubted her now saw her as a leader in the making. And Richard Lawson? He remained a guiding presence in her life. Their bond had grown beyond circumstance. Together, they started a small charitable initiative to help airline staff in financial distress, a fund that supported workers who, like Elena, carried hidden burdens behind their polished smiles. As for Grace Miller, the retired schoolteacher whose sharp eyes set everything in motion, she kept in touch too. She told her former students about the flight attendant who admitted her mistake and rebuilt her life, using it as a living lesson that integrity matters more than perfection. Elena's story reminds us of something we too often forget. Desperation can push even good people into terrible mistakes, but kindness, true, radical kindness, has the power to break that cycle. Richard could have chosen anger. He could have chosen punishment. Instead, he chose mercy. And that choice didn't just save Elena's job, it saved her spirit, her dignity, her future. We live in a world where judgment comes quickly, and forgiveness feels rare. Yet stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us, often in the moments we least expect. Think about your own life. Maybe you've been Elena, struggling silently, making mistakes you thought defined you forever. Or maybe you've been Richard, in a position to choose between condemnation and compassion. Whichever side you've stood on, remember this: one act of kindness can echo far beyond the moment, shaping futures we can't yet see. Kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest force we have. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. It helps more people discover these messages of hope. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of human kindness that restore faith in humanity. Most importantly, look around your own life. Who is struggling silently? Who needs a rope, not a stone? You have the power to change someone's entire world with one choice. So I'll leave you with this question: what act of kindness will you perform this week? Share it in the comments below. Let's inspire each other to make compassion our legacy.